Greetings, this is Greg, coming to you from Suite 1368 at the glorious St. Michael's Recording Studio. This video is intended for either career pilots or pilots planning on entering the industry. The rest of you will probably find it pretty dull and irrelevant. If you're here for airplane or automotive content, you might want to watch a different video on this channel. There's none of that on this video. I want to talk about two big factors that have a large effect on an airline pilot's career in the United States. These are ACMI Airlines and scope clauses, and I want to talk about how they relate to each other. This video will focus on ACMI, with scope being covered in a companion video on this channel. No, I'm not turning this into an aviation career channel, but I feel, based on what I'm hearing from my fellow pilots on the line, that these two videos need to be made, and I don't see the airline career channels on YouTube or other places covering these critical topics. These subjects are important to understand in order for an airline pilot in the United States to make sound career choices. I need to be clear that I'm not commenting on the business sense or ethics involved here. I'm only discussing these things as they affect a pilot's career. ACMI stands for Aircraft, Cruise, Maintenance, and Insurance. ACMI airlines are simply airlines that do not sell space for either passengers or freight to the general public, but rather lease out airplanes to airlines or other entities that do sell passenger tickets or shipping. And that lease will include, as you would probably guess, the aircraft's crews, maintenance, and insurance, hence ACMI. As an example, suppose you own a casino in Vegas, and I hope you do. You get the idea of selling Vegas vacations at your casino, which includes round-trip airfare. You have the casino, you have hotel space, you have the ability to sell tickets, but you don't have an airline. So not a problem. You contract an ACMI airline to do the flying for you. They provide the aircraft crews, maintenance, and insurance. You buy the fuel and sell the tickets. If it's a long-term contract, you can even have the airplane painted in the livery of your organization, so it will look like you have an airline. Now, before we go on, I want to make this clear as well. I'm talking about this from a pilot point of view. I'm making no attempt to give an exact legal definition of anything here. I'm just trying to show the overall big picture. Now, to further explain the ACMI business model, we're going to start by taking a look at Amazon because it's an easy to understand real-world example that we're all familiar with. Amazon sells products and ships them to their customers, often shipping them by air. However, Amazon is not an airline, nor does it wholly own any airline. Now, if you spend much time at airports, it may look as if Amazon owns an airline called Prime Air, but no such airline exists. The planes that are in Prime Air paint schemes are operated by ACMI Airlines. At the moment, it could be one of four airlines: Atlas Air, Air Transport International, Southern Air, or Sun Country. And there could be others by the time you're watching this video because that situation is a bit fluid. If you look really closely at each airplane, you'll see that each one has the actual airline name on it somewhere near the nose wheel. It's usually very hard to see it, as it is on this Atlas Air 767, and that's by design. So at this time, Amazon is embracing the ACMI business model. The pilots who fly planes in Prime Air livery do not work directly for Amazon, and they don't get paid by Amazon. This is very different from the picture at what I'll call a traditional airline. For this example, we'll use UPS. UPS, United Parcel Service, is not an ACMI airline. That's not to say that they don't occasionally do contract work. There are exceptions to everything, of course, but generally speaking, UPS planes are hauling freight that has a UPS shipping label, and they are flown by pilots on the UPS seniority list who get paychecks from UPS. For reasons we'll be getting into, the UPS pilots union is in a better position to negotiate pay and benefits as compared with any of the pilots' unions in the Prime Air system. As a quick example, Here is the pay scale for a 5-year and up 767 captain at ATI. ATI is the highest paying airline flying 767s in the Prime Air system. Here it is for UPS. A 10-year captain at UPS is making $321 per hour versus $268 at ATI. Keep in mind, those pay rates per, quote, hour, unquote, are not literally equal to an hour of work. They are based on a credit hour system, which has something to do with flight hours, and the hours that they get paid for are far, far less than actual hours worked, and that's important to understand. So, in any case, the 321 at UPS versus 268 at the ACMI airline, in this case ATI, is a big difference. And not only is that a huge difference, when you look at the total compensation package, hours worked, medical benefits, retirement, and so on, the difference is much larger still in favor of UPS. Again, ATI has the highest pay scale in the Prime Air network for the 767. Pay is far lower at Atlas and Southern Air, about $100 less per credit hour. So I didn't cherry pick a good example to make my point here. I actually went the other way. Now, let's talk about the passenger airlines. About half of the passenger flights in the U.S. are flown by ACMI carriers. More often than not, passengers on these airplanes literally have no idea what airline they're on. In fact, I'll bet dollars to donuts that 9 out of 10 of the revenue passengers on this plane think they are on Delta Airlines, but they are not. If you look closely, you'll see it's actually SkyWest Airlines, which is an ACMI airline. SkyWest didn't sell the tickets for this flight. Delta sold them. Most passengers have probably never heard of SkyWest, yet it's actually a huge airline. They have around 450 airplanes, all of them jets. They do ACMI flying for Delta, Alaska, American, and United. If you have traveled by air within the United States, chances are good you have ridden on SkyWest. Now, pilots at Delta get paid far more than pilots at any of the so-called regional airlines who do the ACMI flying for Delta. There are two main reasons for this. First, the Delta pilots are in superior negotiating positions. And second, the pilots at Delta fly bigger planes. Bigger planes generate more revenue, thus usually pay more. I do want to stress that even with planes of the same size, as we saw in the UPS ATI example, ACMI pilots are almost always paid significantly less. With planes of different sizes, the pay gaps get much larger. As an example, the hourly rate on the lowest paying airplane at Delta, the lowest, is more than twice the highest hourly rate at SkyWest. The main airlines take great pains to mask the actual airline identities from customers, which is why so few know what airline they're riding on. The term for this masking is called seamless service, and I think the term was coined by a former American Airlines CEO, Robert Crandall. The idea is that when a passenger gets off the main airliner, or the main airline, at a hub, let's say Dallas, he then goes through the terminal and gets on another airplane without noticing that it's a different airline. The clues are very small and they're easy to miss. There is the aforementioned name, usually written in small letters near the nose wheel, but it's difficult to see from the terminal or jetway, and only someone looking for it specifically will probably notice it. A sharp passenger might notice some fine print somewhere on the passenger briefing card, although I have seen some cases where the passenger briefing card only has the name of the mainline airline on it. Furthermore, flight attendants make announcements designed to give the impression that it's all one airline. Listen to this one.
Next flight, please open the air vents above your seat and lower the window shade. Before leaving the aircraft, take a quick look around your seat and make sure you have everything you brought on board. On behalf of Delta, thank you again for sharing your journey with us. We've enjoyed having you on board and we can't wait to have you back. Have a wonderful evening.
Clearly, from that announcement, you would think I was riding on Delta Airlines, but that wasn't the case. It's just another part of the illusion. So why is it that pilots and pilot unions at ACMI Airlines are at such a disadvantage in negotiations, and what can be done about it? The primary problem is something called whipsawing. This is when the main airline subcontracts with multiple ACMI airlines in an effort to get them to compete in a race to the bottom in terms of pay, benefits, and everything else. Let's use Delta as an example. Although the same business model is in place at numerous other airlines, including American, United, and others. Please don't think I'm picking on Delta. I actually like Delta, and I ride on them all the time. The planes flown by Delta pilots are all larger planes, generally Boeing 717s and bigger. The ACMI airlines fly the smaller stuff. Delta contracts with at least 3 ACMI airlines at the time of this video: Endeavor, Republic, and SkyWest. The actual number varies, as that itself is a part of the whipsawing strategy. Whipsawing is simple. The main airline, the one selling the tickets, will simply favor the ACMI airline with the lower cost pilot group. Often, even more so if it's a low cost non-union pilot group. They really like that. Any ACMI airline in contract negotiations will face, with pilots in contract negotiations, will face being replaced by another ACMI airline within the system. Or if not replaced, it can be shrunk. That's pretty easy to do. They just take trips from one airline and give them to another. With the airline that's in negotiations, pilot negotiations, facing furloughs and downgrades, their negotiating position is weakened. Now, this is great for investors in the airline, but it's not so great for your career, which is why working at an ACMI airline is usually best thought of as a stepping stone and not a career destination. At this point, it should be obvious that the main point of the ACMI business model is to drive down labor costs. Furthermore, in the case of the Delta example, where they're using 3 ACMI carriers, also known as regionals, it has to drive them down enough to offset the profits of these 3 airlines and their management teams. And regional and ACMI is not exactly the same thing, but most airlines that people refer to as regionals are ACMI carriers. Moving on. Of course, the management teams at the ACMI airlines don't want to miss out on the fun opportunities provided by whipsawing either. So we end up with a second level of whipsawing action here. It's not at all uncommon for a company to own multiple ACMI airlines and whipsaw them against each other. As an example, Transstates Holdings owned Transstates, GoJet, and Compass Airlines. All ACMI airlines, all competing for the same contracts with the big airlines. They shut down 2 of those airlines this year. Only GoJet remains, and guess which of the 3 had the lowest paid pilots? This happens in the big plane ACMI world as well. For example, ATSG owns ABX Air and ATI, both of which fly 767s in the DHL network. DHL is the absolute industry king of whipsawing. On any given night, there are about 10 ACMI airlines on the ramp on DHL's ramp at Cincinnati Airport. Most of them are in DHL livery, so to the public, if they happen to be driving by, it appears as if they have their own airline. And they actually did at one time, but shifted to an all ACMI business model. That's something I'll talk about in the scope episode. It's actually a pretty interesting story. I looked up the definition of ACMI on various websites, and most of them, like this one from Wikipedia, state, in my view incorrectly, that it's usually a short-term lease needed due to the requirements for extra aircraft during peak seasons, aircraft in maintenance, or regulatory issues. That's true to a small extent. There are cases like those. However, I'll argue that even a cursory glance at airlines shows that the primary reason for the ACMI business model is to keep pilot wages down. For example, there is no regulatory or logistical reason that Delta can't operate all of the regional jets in their system, but instead they contract them out to multiple ACMI carriers. And the same is true at American, United, and Alaskan. So to say that it's needed for peak volume or maintenance reasons is just nonsense. They do it continuously, and they've been doing it for 30 years. In short, your career should be planned out to use ACMI Airlines as a stepping stone because they're going to pay less, and they also tend to not last all that long. Certainly not the length of an entire pilot's career, not usually. It's just too easy for the controlling entities to just close one down and start another. That puts everyone working there back on first or second year pay with minimal vacation time, no union contract, at least in the short term, minimal medical benefits, retirement, all of that. And this happens over and over. I couldn't begin to list all of the large ACMI carriers that have closed down in the last 20 years. Nobody notices when they close down because their brands were never in the public eye anyway. It's a bit different with the main airlines as they have value in their brand name. Delta can't just shut down and start a new airline called Omega without losing the value of the Delta brand. An ACMI carrier can do that because they usually have minimal or zero brand recognition anyway. Don't underestimate the importance of brand recognition to a company. It's a big deal. Someone from Coca-Cola once suggested that if all of their bottling plants and assets went up in smoke overnight, they could rebuild the entire company with nothing but just their trademark. It's that valuable. Within an airline's network, the only trademark that matters is that of the main line. When Compass Airlines shut down in mid-2020, nobody even noticed, not even passengers flying on Delta tickets out of airports previously serviced by Compass. They continued to fly on a Delta ticket. With seamless service, they saw no change whatsoever when they boarded a plane operated by another ACMI carrier in Delta's livery. Some pilots end up staying at ACMI carriers all the way until retirement. There are some reasons for that. First, we tend to get caught up in what I call the golden handcuffs. More on that later. For those who don't know, pilot jobs are almost always seniority based, meaning that your position as a captain or co-pilot, along with your choices of vacation weeks, days off in any given month, the trips you fly, other job-related factors are all based on your date of hire relative to the other pilots at the company. Almost every company has a seniority list, and a seniority list is essentially a list of all the pilots that work there in order of seniority, in other words, based on hire date. There are some exceptions to that. With airline mergers, there's some other things in there, but generally it's going to be based on date of hire. Now, this is unlike any other profession. Imagine if a doctor working at a hospital for 20 years, very experienced doctor, and that doctor lost his job because through no fault of his own, the hospital was mismanaged and closed down. Now that doctor finds that when he goes to another hospital, he has to do his residency all over again, then work his way up from the bottom, and it's going to take him another 20 years to get back to where he was. Well, of course, doctors don't have to go through that, but that is exactly how it is for airline pilots. It is a huge disaster for a senior pilot when their airline closes down, because he's going to have to go to the bottom of the list, first year pay, and be on probation at the next airline. It doesn't matter how experienced he is. It's also very difficult to leave one airline for another for financial reasons sometimes. That brings us to what I call the golden handcuff dilemma. It's easy to find yourself in a situation at an ACMI airline where you have made captain, you're making a decent salary, you have an easy commute, maybe you live in base, whatever, things are going swimmingly. You look at other airlines because you'd like to go to a better paying airline, and almost no matter where you go, you're going to have to take a pay cut or be on probationary status at the new airline for the first year. Now, if you do go, the payoff for taking that first year hit will be massive. The payoff will equal millions over your 20-year career when you figure in retirement and everything else. But some people get themselves into a position where they just can't take that initial pay cut for the first year. That's what I call the golden handcuff dilemma, And you really want to avoid getting caught in this, because not only is it going to cost you a lot, things are going to be much, much worse for you when 10 years down the road, your ACMI carrier closes down. And while some ACMI carriers have lasted a long time, and yes, some legacy carriers have disappeared, the odds statistically are hugely against you at an ACMI outfit. At this moment, few airlines are hiring at the time that I'm making this video. Many will be furloughing or instituting pay cuts, meaning that most people that are at ACMI carriers right now are stuck there. But even without the current virus problem, many people are stuck at ACMI carriers. I'm not saying that every pilot should be trying to leave their ACMI job. Sometimes it makes sense to stay. For example, if someone is a senior captain and over 50 years old, it may not be worth leaving. Odds are that your airline is going to make it until you retire, and if you leave, you may not have enough years as a captain at the next airline to make up the money you lost for the first year or 2-3 years, whatever it is. There are other cases. For example, I know some great pilots who are great employees, but they just don't interview well, which makes it hard for them to go anywhere. And there are cases of a pilot who maybe has a violation or some sort of issue on the record from when they were younger, but they learned from it and it doesn't really matter, but it makes it difficult to get a job. Those things happen. So if that's your situation, yeah, it may not be worth it to leave for another airline. However, in most cases, and certainly for anyone under 45 or 50, leaving an ACMI airline to go to a non-ACMI airline is usually a really good move. Now let's talk about job security. This is a big one. If you're at a mainline airline like American, United, Delta, FedEx, or UPS, it is unlikely that your airline is going to disappear. Now, you may get laid off, but that's much different from your airline closing down. It's far less of a disaster. Now, of course, it could happen that, let's say American Airlines becomes mismanaged enough that it goes out of business. That is possible. But then, yeah, everybody there is going to end up out of work. But that's a risk that you take at any airline or at any company. At an ACMI airline, you not only have that risk, you have other much greater risks. Next, I need to dispel the very common myth among my fellow pilots that ACMI contracts provide pilots with job security. The thinking is that if I'm working for Hercules Air and Hercules has a 10-year ACMI contract with Hillbloom Logistics, then my job is secure for 10 years. Wrong. The job is not secure at all. That ACMI contract provides Hercules Air with financial security, not job security for the pilots. It's completely different. Here's how this works. Hercules won't enter into the ACMI agreement without some clause in their contract that sets terms and conditions in case the duration of the agreement is cut short. Hercules isn't going to they're not going to risk, all the money that they spent on airplanes, pilot training, hiring mechanics, parts supply inventory, all the stuff they're going to need to spool up for the operation without some kind of protection. Hillbloom Logistics will have to pay Hercules some sort of penalty if they terminate the deal early. Thus, if Hillbloom terminates early, Hercules still gets paid some amount. That amount is usually their cost plus some of the profit that they missed out on. Then they furlough the employees, and you as a pilot are out of a job 2 years into that 10-year ACMI contract. Don't worry though, management still got paid. That was part of their contract. And there's a new startup ACMI outfit I heard about that just got a contract with Hillbloom Logistics. If you hurry, you might be able to get a job there, back to the bottom of the seniority list for you, or the unemployment line. Now, if you think this is some sort of fantasy scenario, it's not. It happens all the time. In fact, it's happened to me twice. ACMI contracts do not protect pilots, period. Scope clauses protect pilots, but I'm going to talk about that in the next episode. I mentioned earlier that ACMI pilots have less job security than those at conventional airlines, and I want to explain why. Any airline can go out of business due to mismanagement, changing realities in the market, changing needs for airline services, or just changing realities in general that are outside of the airline's control. And of course, that's true for any business, not just airlines. But ACMI Airlines are, of course, subject to all of these same threats, but have additional threats. Consider a traditional airline like United or American. They have many thousands of customers. If one of their customers goes out of business, the airlines will barely notice. Even a really great customer, let's say one that buys 10 business class tickets a week, or even hundreds of tickets a week, is just a drop in the bucket to them. At an ACMI airline, it's not like that. Most ACMI airlines have 1, 2, or 3 customers. Even the biggest usually only have 4 or 5. Thus, if just one of their customers goes out of business, or even just goes through a tough time where they cut back on services needed, it can sink an ACMI airline overnight. This is a huge additional risk to ACMI pilot groups that pilots at traditional airlines just don't have. Another additional risk is that the ACMI airline will be replaced by another ACMI airline. Even if the main customer is doing just fine, let's say United or UPS, whatever, it doesn't matter, that main customer, they might be doing great, but they still are going to want to reduce costs, and if they have the opportunity to do it, they often will. As a fantasy example, let's go back to our made-up company, Hillbloom Logistics. They may have an ACMI contract with, I'll make up more companies here, they have an ACMI contract with Boxair. And Boxair operates a few 737s for them, moving freight around the United States. Now another company comes in, Package Air, and they come in with a lower bid, and Hillbloom Logistics decides to switch airlines. They pay off the whatever the buyout clause is for the ACMI contract with Boxair and switch over to Package Air. The pilots at Boxair are now on the street. Of course, they might be able to get jobs over at the new airline, Package Air, but even so, if they do, it's going to be back to the first year pay scale, back on probation, no accrued vacation or sick time. If Hillbloom's Logistics does this over and over, say every 10 years, it will really help to keep labor costs down. This can't really happen at a traditional airline because those pilots are usually protected by a scope clause, which again will be discussed in the next episode. So this is an additional threat that really hits the ACMI pilots pretty hard. So it's possible to be at an ACMI airline that's doing perfectly well and still rather suddenly find your career going all pear-shaped. At least at a traditional airline, as long as that airline is healthy and you don't get fired, it's going to be just fine. Now in the past, most pilots got around this problem by using ACMI airlines as stepping stones to the big leagues. In other words, they would just work for them for a few years and then they'd get on at a big league airline, which for purposes of this discussion in the United States, let's say that's Delta, American, United, SkyWest, Alaska, UPS, FedEx, maybe some others. This plan of using ACMI Airlines as a stepping stone is still a good plan, but the problem now is that our reality has changed. ACMI pilot jobs are now about 50% of the total passenger flying jobs, and soon ACMI freight jobs will be the majority of cargo flying in the United States. While UPS and FedEx are using the traditional airline models, DHL, Amazon, and others are going with 100% ACMI. There is some talk of Amazon going the traditional route, but I don't see it happening, at least not for a while. That could be a whole video, and I just don't want to go down that road right now. There's also another big player emerging in the global freight network, which I am very certain is going to go the ACMI route. I think they'll have to for regulatory reasons. So with the majority of pilot jobs moving into the ACMI world, or if not the outright majority, let's just say a huge percentage, we as pilots have to start looking at new ways to protect our careers. It's no longer okay, in my opinion, to just ignore the problems of ACMI for pilots in hopes of getting on at a, quote, real airline, unquote. We're in a new reality, and most of us are going to be in the ACMI world for large portions of our careers, if not our entire careers. I'll continue my thoughts on this in my scope clause video. Thanks for watching. I sincerely hope you got something out of this. Have a great day, and goodbye for now.
The row in front of you is 6 feet away. You may retrieve your items and deplane. We appreciate your understanding and assistance. Your satisfaction is important to us. In the next several days, you may receive an email survey from Delta. We value your feedback and use your responses to continually improve your travel experience. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you. We invite you to download and use the Fly Delta app for all your future travel needs, including checking in for flights and managing your SkyMiles account.